My name is Mirra, and this is my colleague Subhan Hafiz, and we will present our project entitled Jihad. What's happening with this virtue? This might be a very provocative title, but we're here not to provoke all of you to doing jihad. Okay. We know in Muslim, jihad for Muslim is a virtue. Many Islamic scholars have explained the virtue of jihad based on Sharia. Sharia is Islamic law that derived from Quran and Hadith. The product of the study was known as Tafsir of the Virtue of Jihad and have become agreement among Muslims in many different groups and community. The phenomenon in this regard, there are different interpretation and practice in implementing this virtue in Islamic community with wide range for peace to terrorism. As you see that jihad as in definition, as term is to make substantial effort, but we already also know that based on literature there are so many definition concept of jihad. One of this example is the greater jihad and the lesser jihad, and many different group in Islamic group tend to implementing the greater jihad than lesser jihad. To explain this phenomenon, we assume that there are two kinds of virtue of jihad. The first is what we call an ideal virtue of jihad. This virtue based on Sharia term. The second is the living virtue of jihad. This virtue was constructed by people and live in individual mental construct as social representation. This study will integrate multiple disciplines with different approach and methodology. In the first study, we will use tafsir hermeneutic from theology to study the ideal virtue of jihad. Meanwhile, we will explore the living virtue of jihad with two approaches. The first approach is constructive realism, and so in a micro individual level, and social representation in micro and macro level. We will use open-ended question with coding category analysis and narrative data based on interview. From this study, we will expect to identify the variation of the living virtue of jihad in the Islamic group or community based on socio-cultural context. The central question of our research is what are the psychological factors that contributed for one Muslim in implementing the virtue of jihad, and how is the motivation in implementing the virtue can vary different one to another. We predict that the variation of the living virtue of jihad will relate it to specific environment and social condition and its motivation. Based on literature review, at least 3 types of motivation related to this virtue. There is personal, interpersonal, and ideology. Based on the different type of motivation that we have found, we will expect it able to categorize which people in what groups become more virtuous compared one to another. So we will explain use a metric, psycho, and sociogram between variation of the group.
Okay. after we conduct first research, first phase and second phase, our first phase is theological analysis into the virtue of jihad. So we expect that we will have a broad view, wide view of jihad. So in the second phase, we want to see whether what concept of jihad will suitable into what kind of groups of Muslim in a community. So we say it's living jihad, living picture of jihad in the group. And then we want also get into more individual aspect. So because even they are from the same group, but they practice virtue of jihad differently. So we want to know what kind of person who practice highly or lower virtues of jihad. So we can see that from this methodology is quite different. Before, when we study about jihad or another virtue from religion, mostly it only studied by theology. So in this research, we want to know that is it the theological analysis can be used by sociology and psychology. So we want to know that if the interpretation of jihad is war, which group will use it? If the interpretation of jihad is fighting ourselves, which group of Muslim group will use the concept? And we want to know that even they are from same moderate group, same moderate Islamic group, there are different way that people expressing their jihad. For example, in Indonesia, there's like Nahdlatul Ulama or Muhammadiyah. They are usually said as moderate group, but in this group, each person had differently motivation in doing jihad, even the jihad as a war or jihad as fighting ourselves. So we believe that this research is quite different from another research. And we also believe that the methodology is quite innovative because it's quite hard to bridge theology and sociology and psychology. And in the end, we want to put it neuroscience as one method to prove that this conclusion could have neural basis. So we want to know that when someone becomes so virtuous, highly virtuous from into jihad, whether he or she had highly active on higher level thinking or lower level thinking. So we want to know also, is it emotion or rational had dominant, which one is more dominant in practicing this virtue? Okay, and okay, the social dimension of the virtue is one of the questions we want to address. That, of course, the virtue of jihad cannot be understood unless we see the social aspect, where the virtue, the living virtue of jihad in the moderate group, of Islam in fundamental group of Islam, which one will live? Is it the fundamental group will pick interpretation of war, and how it become so virtuous to the one in the group. Okay, we also want to address this question. From individual aspect, we hope we can understand that this virtues, how it developed, how each people can have different motivation into one virtues. Okay, and of course, this is the Moral and Virtues Forum. It's not Jihad forums, so we believe that this research might. Okay, this research. We might doing research about maybe another virtue from religion, like compassion, that acknowledged by many religions. Maybe we believe that we had to do this same pace of research in improve understanding virtue from religion that can live in group and can be so motivated to someone, and how the higher thinking or lower thinking, feeling and rational can give contribution in practicing the virtues. That's our research proposal. Thank you very much.
Could elaborate on what you plan to do for study number 3, for example?
Okay, for study number 3, we had okay. The last one, it's from CITEC lab. They had tomography, just like something we can put it in the brain like helm, so we can measure brain activity. So we had this lab.
Can you say more about what you will measure? What stimuli will you present? And what will you look for? What differences?
Okay. So from first and second research, we want to create treatment stimulus into several people from several group of Muslim, so that we can put a picture, so he can as to stimulate their brain. Then the tomography, it's called ECPT. The tomography will measure the brain activity from blood come to the brain. I think neuroscience can explain it more than me, but the thing that we put it in the head can measure the activity of the brain.
Sorry. Can you say more?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe I can edit the information about the such study. We will explain the virtue motivation in neuroscience. So the method we use is experiment design using randomized control trial. The RCT using a sample based on evidence base that we found in a previous study. So we can accommodate the influence of social context in the experiment. From the study, we expect design effective intervention for individual with group and differences. since we believe that from specific group with particular motivation will need specific intervention to become high virtuous person, and so on. So we plan that the subject of experiment will give the picture as stimulus, and they will react, the reaction from the picture. Example is the picture related to solidarity, to in-group solidarity. So we will give a picture like the war in Afghanistan, and then the victim of the bombing and so on, and how they reacted. Because in a previous study we will conduct that many pictures enhance the solidarity of jihadists to involve the jihad in many places in the world.
How did you know it enhanced?
Yeah.
How do you know it enhanced jihad?
The picture.
Yeah, how did you? Yes. What was the measurement? How do you know?
Yeah. We will see the brand activity, because in the previous study we will know that the type of different motivation related to jihad, and then we will see that which brand in higher order thinking or level order low order thinking. So if there is a sample, one stimulus picture comes and they're active, the activity of the brain will show just a little part of the brain of the whole part of the brain. We assume that the higher virtuous person will have high activity in higher order thinking, because the higher virtuous person have congruent between knowledge and then motivation and then the intention behavior. But in low virtuous person will only activate some little of the brain. Maybe we will know after we have the conduct in first end to study. We will design the manipulative experiment.
Jennifer.
I have a question about why you're framing jihad as a virtue. So, is there any sense within Muslim culture that you might have those for whom there is no concern with engaging in this kind of struggle, and then those who are deeply concerned about engaging in this struggle, and then maybe another group who have successfully worked through this struggle? Then, if then it would map onto a distinction that's made in Aristotelian thought, incontinence, continence, virtue, or whether that's completely, that there's nothing comparable to that in Muslim culture. And I mean, it's possible that the sense is that there's no end to the struggle, that there's always some new struggle that one might engage in. And just whether it might be more appropriate to say that this is a way of framing the moral life, if there's no possibility of ever ending the struggle, but always new struggles to be engaged in, whether this is not a virtue per se, but a way of conceiving of the task of the moral life, or moral and spiritual life.
Okay. If you ask a Muslim, we believe that Muslims said that jihad is virtue, but how we implement this virtue, it's widely different. So, from Muslim interpreter, they widely interpret jihad from defending ourselves, helping others, into fighting into our, for example, okay, I want to have a car, but I don't have money, so I struggle not to buy a car. It's also jihad for some Muslim. So the interpretation is wide, but how we do it, it's depend on the groups. For fundamental groups, they maybe say that, okay, this time jihad have to be war. But for moderate group, this time jihad have to be doing research, study, it's also jihad. And we also want to know that in individual level, for example, from the same fundamental group, there are different motivation between someone that, okay, I will sacrifice myself, but the other say, no, it's not sacrificing self, but fighting. So we want to know that also. And the last but not least, we want to know that is it the neural basis of this virtue had really exist? So is it because they are think about the virtue, understand about the virtue, or they get, for example, conformity for the group? We believe that neuroscience can help us to understand that problems.
Maybe I will explain more that many, all Muslims believe that being a good Muslim is have to do jihad. But how the jihad they will implementing the jihad, like Subhan said, there's very different ways. But all of the kind of jihad is explained in Islamic literature.
Question over here? Yes.
I was just wondering, in some of the earlier presentations, there was a link between virtue and happiness. I was wondering, in the Islamic culture, is there such a link between thinking about, because you describe it as an inner struggle or some kind of struggle, it seems to be, producing a lot of unhappiness if you're struggling rather than happiness. So it's just a clarification about whether there is such a connection with well-being or happiness in the Islamic way of thinking about it.
Maybe if I never read in the previous study about linking about the jihad and the happiness, but in my research about jihadis, they do jihad because they want to be happy. Because they are not happy if Muslim has been attacked, harassment, and as inferior, not I cannot practicing a good Muslim. But if the ultimate happy for Muslim is they can practice as a good Muslim in all the way who determined by religion.
Maybe I can add more. For Muslim, jihad as a virtue is obligation. So doing jihad, it's hopefully will make them more happy. Because not doing it, it means that not obligate to the religion itself.
All right. Thank you very much.